Hello. Okay, for those who have seen who read the thumbnail and the title and so on, may think that automatically I'm going to complain and challenge and disagree with the Pope and so on. Yes and no. For those of you who know me, my followers and the members of this channel, you know that I am, or try to be, a faithful Catholic. And criticizing the Pope or having doubts about what the Pope, how the Pope expressed himself, is a perfectly natural thing to do for any Catholic. I think it's only Protestants who think that no. My goodness, many saints, women saints, said to popes, no. Catherine of Siena. Today we celebrate 15th of October. We celebrate Saint Teresa of Avila. Saint Teresa of Avila. Oh goodness. Okay. Saint Teresa of Avila, she said, look, I'm trying to write the way I understand things, all right? The way I understand them. Now, of course, if the church comes and tells me that is wrong, fine. But in answer, for example, to a cardinal who was complaining, saying things like these women delving into theology, Saint Teresa wrote a very, very nice, polite, humble letter. But at the end she says, and even though we are women and we have no letters, sometimes we get things right. Punch. The cardinal disappeared. Anyway, so no, I'm not Saint Teresa, but I'm not going to tell you my own words. I'm actually going to quote and read from an author with whom I went to because I agree, and he deals with this matter of what the Pope, this exhortation to charity and so on. He deals exactly with that, and I said, I know where to go. So because I agree with, they're not my words, because I don't have, he was a prolific, wonderful author, and I'm not. So I'm quoting him all the time, but I agree fully with him. Who is this author? Oh my goodness, I love him. No one knows of him. Okay, he's becoming now a little bit popular. He's a French author from the 19th century. His name is Ernest Hello. Hello, he's French. Hello is spelled Hello. Okay, and even the French don't know really much about him. He is becoming known a little bit. He has been forgotten, and they're beginning to find him because another author, Leon Bloy, is becoming popular. Leon Bloy from the late 19th, early 20th century. He is becoming popular now, and he was greatly influenced by Ernest Hello. Okay, so what does Ernest? He was a first of all, let me tell you a little bit. Ernest Hello was born in 1828 in France, almost 50 years before Chesterton was born in England in 1874. Despite these geographical and generational differences, Hello and Chesterton shared remarkable similarities. They were journalists, devout Catholics, sharply intelligent, superb essayists, as we all know, and shrewd critics of their age. Besides, both men, they have many things in common. They're very different, but they have quite a lot of things in common. Both suffered from chronic ill health. Fortunately, each of them had a devoted wife whose loving care extended, their husbands' lives. Generally, journalists emphasize temporal, profane matters to the exclusion of, obviously, eternal spiritual concerns. Hello and Chesterton are prominent exceptions to this rule. They critiqued their respective ages, characterized both by rapid technological changes and the abandonment of traditional Catholic values. Both writers warned that this abandonment would create a society that would be confused, sometimes irrational, and especially unhappy, but nevertheless very fastidious about faddish concerns. Okay, so Hello is practically unknown in France, but not so much, but certainly in England, in the Anglosphere. He was a prolific writer, many articles, but his main book, L'Homme, The Man, Life, Science and Art, has not been published in English in a new edition for about 100 years, and that and very little else is all that was translated. Okay, so I'm going to read you a little essays, not very long, perhaps half an hour, something like that, about this thing about charity that I think responds to, in a certain way, to the Pope's exhortation, or perhaps what might be not clear or lacking in that exhortation. If you are patient, at the end of it, I will read you a tiny little article that he has on a completely different matter. It's called The Mediocre Man, but that will be at the end. Okay, so this particular little essay is titled Intellectual Charity. What does he mean by intellectual charity? He starts, whenever there is a question of material charity, people are to be found always ready to help. And again, when it is a question of teaching the fundamental truths of religion to nations sunk in ignorance, heroes invariably come forward willing to devote themselves to this heroic task. But I want to speak now of a kind of charity which is often forgotten: intellectual charity. Man has 1,000 needs. He does not live by bread alone. He lives also by the divine gift of words, of speech. There are some men who have peculiar and exceptional needs more than others, and they need light. There are other men who need that ideas should come to them clothed in noble words. Not only the satisfaction of their intellect, but the very life of their soul, I might also add of their body, would seem to depend on truth being presented to them in a form that they can desire and accept and assimilate. These men belong to the poor also, a special kind of poor. For they have one need more than most men, a need that is rarely satisfied. They are poor indeed, and the charity which cares for them is the rarest of all charities, intellectual charity. The Gospel speaks on many occasions of those who hunger and thirst, giving us plainly to understand that these expressions are used in the widest and most general sense. To hunger and thirst after justice is numbered among the Beatitudes. But men seem curiously disposed to contract, to narrow the meaning of this hunger and this thirst, which it is their duty to try and relieve. We know that the more material a need is, the more pity it excites. On the other hand, the higher the type of need, the less compassion is felt for it. Many a man who would not dream of leaving another man to die of hunger, in the material sense of the word, is not afraid to commit the same act in an intellectual sense. The case of humanity, of Christianity today, of Catholics and the Catholic Church, is not only material or intellectual, spiritual also. The void, the vacuity, this is me speaking now, it's time out. The void, the vacuity, the spiritual emptiness most people today feel, and for which they turn to the church for food. And the church does not seem to be there, really, to fill that void. But this is also charity in this case, spiritual charity in this case. And the Pope would seem to me to be addressing mainly once more the material. Hello continues. He's writing, as I told you, in the 19th century, okay? So his world and our world is different. The sense of this void, as we feel it today, was perhaps not yet there, or perhaps it was in a different form. So he's addressing what he calls the intellectual charity, the charity of the mind that is needed. We have the charity of the body, material needs, for those who have no means. Yes, we understand that. The charity of the mind is the intellectual charity. The charity of the soul, the spiritual. Hello continues. Now, because he's a journalist, he's aware of the influence of the press at the time. And so he says, now, written speech may be a great charity too, and its diffusion, whenever is true and beautiful, is one of the acts of charity most suited to our time. In many souls, a hunger and thirst exists, which can only be satisfied by words, written or oral. Between these eager readers, the readers of this book that he's writing, and me, the writer, he says, who should also be eager, a current of sublime charity may be established, since all of us, the writer and the reader, all of us give and all receive. The reader of this book, or I would say the listener or viewer of these podcasts, gives an immense amount to the writer or the speaker. And the writer or the speaker himself may not be aware of how much he receives from his reader or listener. Raphael, the great painter, said, "To understand is to equal out." No one can estimate too highly the importance of the press in our days, he said, of the journal, the newspaper. In today's world, we would also have the podcast, today. Its duties, its rights, its responsibilities, the duties which we have also towards it. Because the written word, let's say the journal, distributes the bread of the intellect. It often penetrates where books do not penetrate. Or even in a humble YouTube video, it may be listened to by people who would not sit down to read a book. So we're talking about the media in general. It educates the minds of men, if done truthfully. Its influence is all the more profound because it is, for the most part, the influence unperceived directly. Its teaching is all the more effective because it does not set out to teach. It is not pedant. It gives itself no professional airs. The Gospel has told us the very words with which the human race will be judged on the last day. He continues. We all think we understand these words, amazing though they be in their simplicity and their depth. But how many of us really understand them? I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. Yes, but that also means I was hungry, and you gave me not to eat. What strange, unheard of, unsuspected forms will they not take in the day of judgment? This hunger and this thirst on the day of judgment, if you gave me not to eat, in all its forms. What stupefaction will they not cause to men? A need which was quite overlooked, a need which was laughed at on earth, the need of some human soul which seemed nothing better than at the time a whim to ill-natured and contemptuous eyes, will suddenly become of paramount importance. And eternity, with its two perspectives of endless joy and hopeless despair, may depend on the response which a man will give to its appeal in the days when he lived on earth. The hour will come when whoever has contributed, either positively or negatively, by act or by negligence, to the satisfaction of the non-satisfaction of the needs of a soul, will be astounded at the consequences of what may once have seemed to him an unimportant decision. Lord, he will say, when did I see thee thirsty and not give thee to drink? And then he will remember and be confounded. You will tell me, perhaps, that this is a very lofty way of considering the media as it is today. the old and the new, and its duties and the duties which we owe to it, doubtless, but lofty because it is true. Open the great books, which are the foundations of law and of the law and the sources of light. And what is the first word which strikes your eyes? Charity. More especially in the Gospels, charity glows like a flame before our eyes. The Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, the lost sheep, the lost piece of money. There is no end to the instances. To come to the end of them, I should have to cite everything. But to cite everything in the Gospels which refers to charity, I would have to transcribe the whole of the 4 evangelists from the first line to the last. For even where charity is not mentioned by name, it is understood. The Gospels are forever treating of charity because they are forever treating of God. And St. John tells us that God is charity, love. Charity is so deeply embedded in the world of thought that it is difficult even to imagine he means a system of thought, he means a culture, that it is difficult even to imagine a system of religion that would not contain it, of whatever religion. Now, erroneous doctrines do twist its true meaning and even change its nature. But even when they do so, they still adopt it, they preach it, they build upon it as a necessary foundation. This is what I mean. Say what men will, they always advocate charity. One can imagine the maddest, the most monstrous things, but one cannot in a given culture, but one cannot imagine an exhortation in any religion like, for example, my children, do not love one another. Let each of you think only of himself. Woe to him who loves his brother. Woe to him who remembers the poor. No, nowhere. Such principles have never yet been taught, and they never will be taught. This, then, is certain. Charity is the foundation of every doctrine which has any reference to the human race. It would therefore seem evident that every man who is careful to listen to his conscience is, above all things, careful to practice charity. It is so in theory. It is not so in fact. In the life of many a man attentive to his conscience and anxious not to wound it, charity, which occupies the first place in theory, occupies the last place in practice. And this phenomenon is so extraordinary that it seems to me necessary to state it very clearly, because to cure an evil we must first look it in the face. Every man who strives to obey his conscience is very careful and sometimes very scrupulous on certain points of morality and conduct. Yes, of course. But his care and his solicitude do not always extend to the practice of charity. I am going to make an exception, of course, of all those who are an exception. The saints, for example, whose lives form, as it were, a practical continuation of the Gospels, and those who seek with all their hearts to follow in the footsteps of the saints, place charity before all things in their thoughts and in their minds. But I'm not here speaking of saints or of those who in any degree resemble them. I am speaking of certain men who are striving to be conscientious. And still you can ask me, or you can tell me, but there are very many great works of charity nowadays. Much is done for the poor. Certainly, much is done for the official poor, for those who are officially labeled and assisted as and helped because they are poor, yes. Those who officially occupy in the world the position of poor men are not forgotten. We try not to forget them, cannot be forgotten. And the Church has always had her eyes on the poor. But I'm not speaking of this. I am not speaking of official works of charity. I am speaking of charity itself. I am speaking of charity as applied to all kinds of needs. And I make no exception here of the needs of the mind and the needs of the soul. I am speaking of that profound inner charity which asks itself in the presence of another soul, of another mind, what are your needs? Or, I would add myself personally in the case of the Church or of the Pope, thinking of the faithful, what are their needs? The needs of their minds, the needs of their souls. And after that, the obvious question, and what can I do? What can the Church do to satisfy them? Here, the law continues, for example, is a man who thinks, who meditates, who needs to give to others the fruits of his inner life, the needs of one who needs to give to others. An author needs to give to others. And of other men who might need to receive those fruits. And even further, what can I? Imagine that, what can I, the Pope? What can I, a bishop? What can I, a cardinal? What can I, the Church? What can we do for the man who needs to give? What can the Church do for those others who need also to receive what other men are anxious to give? If I help the man who is in a position to give, I help at the same time the men who need to receive. The benefit is a double one. The charity of which I speak is that intellectual and intelligent charity which springs from the soul and which seeks out the soul. Why is this sublime charity neglected by so many conscientious people? By the Church herself? Could it be that it is because these conscientious people are afraid of doing evil, but they are not so afraid of omitting to do good? Afraid of doing evil, but not so much afraid of not doing good. They are afraid of sinning by act, but they are not afraid of sinning by omission. We must love with all our heart and with all our soul and with all our mind, said Jesus. I do not know if such people love with all their heart and with all their soul, though, if you like, I will admit that they do. But many do not love with all their mind, which is also included. The mind is that which seeks, that which guesses, that which discerns. It is the sword of charity. It is the mind, our reason, that distinguishes good from evil. It is the mind that sees the difference between one man and another man. It is the mind that examines and explores, that probes the hidden depths of things. To love with all one's mind is to add justice to one's charity. To love with all one's mind, all of one's mind, is to pardon superficial imperfections and to attach oneself to the nobility concealed beneath them. To love with all of one's mind is to understand the needs of other minds and other souls. To love with all of one's mind is to detect, wherever they exist, the hunger and thirst of the intellect, and to fly to their relief. To love with all of one's mind is to go to the assistance of the mind wherever it lives, wherever it suffers. Blessed is he that understandeth concerning the needy and poor, says Holy Scripture. Indeed. But now, there are many kinds of poverty. I repeat on purpose the sacred words. I was hungry, and you gave me not to eat. He loves with all his mind, who has been able to divine the needs of others. Poverty not only in a material sense. We ought clearly to understand what is meant by charity, because the more the glorious a word is, the more dangerously it might be used. It is impossible to overstate the importance of language. Words are terrible in their complacence. They lend themselves to any abuse and make no protest. It is just because charity is of all things most sublime that the abuse of charity, of the word charity and what it means, and the employment of its name in a false sense are exceptionally dangerous. Optime corruptio pessima. The best corruption is the worst. The grander the word, the more awful it becomes. It can be used. And if the power which was intended to give life be directed against truth, what service may not thereby be rendered to death? Now, we use the word charity as a weapon against light every time when, instead of crushing error, we parley with it under the pretext of consideration for other people's feelings, of tolerance with others, towards others. We employ the word charity as a weapon against light every time we make it serve as an excuse for relaxing our execration of evil. As a general rule, men love to relax their efforts. There is something in the very act of faltering, of erring, that is somehow pleasing to our human nature. And besides, the absence of any horror of error towards error, the absence of any horror of evil or sin and the devil becomes a plausible excuse for the evil there is in all of us. And consider that simply to feel less hatred or less loathing of evil in general is only perhaps a way of excusing ourselves for the particular evil we cherish in our souls. There is a verse in the Psalms about this, for which little attention is paid. It is qui diligitis Dominum odite malum. You who love the Lord hate evil. He who loves the Lord hates evil. It's the verse in the Bible. I shall explain. The day on which evil entered the world, it saw the birth of something irreconcilable. Charity, love of God, which is what charity means, loving others because they are creatures of God, because we ultimately love God, also through His creatures. That is charity. So charity, I say, requires, supposes, implies, commands a hatred of the enemy of God. At the close of a long war, when each side is exhausted, kings sometimes have often been known to cede to each other such and such fortress, or this fortress or the other fortress. They're tired of fighting, and these concessions have the effect of silencing the cannon for the time being, at least. But truths cannot be treated like fortresses. When it is a question of making peace in spirit and in truth, it is conversion we must have, and repentance, not compromise. Justice demands it, and it is not for us to tamper with justice. And sometimes, as the present time, with wars everywhere and people starving, this is me speaking, the heart of the world is crying out for justice in all areas of life. Hello continues, in the relations between man and man, a reconciliation seems sometimes to take place, and yet there is no change in the heart of the offender, who thinks that a simple handshake will do instead of repentance and compunction for the wrong he has wrought. But it is not long before this false reconciliation reveals its true tendency, which is to lead inevitably to a second separation, which is going to be far wider than the first. The same holds good with regard to doctrines. Apparent peace, purchased by concession, compromise, is as contrary to charity as it is to justice, and opens out an abyss where before there was only a ditch. Charity must have light, and light avoids even the shadow of a compromise. All beauty implies completeness. Peace is perhaps at bottom victory sure of itself. It is the crime of our age, it seems, not to hate evil, but to discuss terms of peace with it and to make proposals to it, to compromise with it. And there is only one proposal to make to it, and it is this, that it should disappear. That's the end of that little essay on charity. I find it fascinating, first of all, because it emphasizes that charity to the poor is not about only material needs. Charity implies responding to a need, and that need may be intellectual. It may be that people want answers. They want direction, and it is not given. And that is a sin against charity too. Anyway, he wrote. This is the second part of the video, but on a little article on something completely different, because he wrote and wrote and wrote a lot on different matters. So this is a little snippet here. The mediocre man. It is said that after, by the way, this is a note to myself, that it is said that after reading the following, this little essay, and perhaps others, by Ernest Hello in this book, L'Homme, the Man, and of course many other writings, Father Garrigou-Lagrange left medical school and became a Dominican priest in order to dedicate his life to the highest excellence in pursuit of God, he said. So here's the little article. Is the mediocre man silly, stupid, idiotic? Not in the least. The idiot, not the mediocre, the idiot is at one extreme of the world, the man of genius at the other. The mediocre man is in the middle. I do not say that he occupies the center of the intellectual world. No. I mean to say that that would be quite another matter. I want to say that he occupies a middle position. What do I mean? The characteristic trait of the mediocre man is his deference for public opinion. He is a follower. He never really thinks for himself. He talks, he repeats what others have said. He judges a man by his age, his position, his success, his income, and he has the most profound respect for those who have attained notoriety, and in the case of us for authors with a large circulation. The mediocre man may have certain special skills. He may even have talent. But here's the thing, he has no insight. He is utterly wanting in intuition. He will never have any. He can learn, he cannot divine. Occasionally he allows an idea to penetrate into his mind, but he does not follow its various applications. And if it were to be stated in different terms, he would deny its truth. The mediocre man may, and often does, respect good people and men of talent. But he fears, he detests both saints and men of genius. He considers them exaggerated. Of what use, he inquires, are for example, the religious orders, especially the contemplative orders? He may approve of the Sisters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. By the way, the ones who brought me up and cared for me from the age of 5 until 17. The Sisters of Charity, love them. But he approves of the Sisters of St. Vincent de Paul because their work relates, partially at least, to the visible world. But the Carmelites, he says, what can be the good of them? Many Catholics think that. The mediocre man admires everything a little. He admires nothing warmly. If you confront him with his own thoughts, his own sentiments, expressed with enthusiasm, he will be rather displeased. He will declare that you are exaggerating. He prefers enemies as long as they are cold. He prefers them to friends who are warm. What he detests above all is enthusiasm. To escape the reproach he makes of you, or all of you who think with consistency and think decisively, he says that you are intolerant. And so, in order not to be intolerant, you would have to take refuge in doubt. But even then, you must be careful not to call doubt by its name. He considers every affirmation insolent, because every affirmation excludes the contradictory proposition. You must therefore represent it as a modest opinion which respects the rights of the contrary opinion. And so, you see, he always appears to affirm something when in fact he is affirming nothing at all. But, however, if you are ever so slightly friendly and slightly hostile to all things, he will consider you wise and reserved. The mediocre man says there is good and evil in all things, and that we must not be absolute in our judgments. And if you strongly affirm the truth, the mediocre man will say that you have too much confidence in yourself. The mediocre man regrets that the Christian religion has dogmas. He would like the Catholic Church to teach ethics. And when you tell him that the code of morals of the Catholic faith comes from its dogmas, just as the consequences come from the principles, he will answer that you exaggerate. If the word exaggeration did not exist, the mediocre man would have to invent it. The mediocre man, in his distrust of all that is great, maintains that he values good sense before everything. But he has not the remotest idea of what good sense is. He merely understands by that expression the negation of all that is lofty. The man of intelligence looks up. The man of intelligence looks up to admire, to worship, to adore. The mediocre man looks up to mock. All that is above him seems to him ridiculous. The infinite appears to him to be a void. The mediocre man appears habitually modest. He couldn't be humble, for if he were humble, he would cease to be mediocre. The humble man scorns all lies, even where they are glorified by the whole earth. And the humble man bows the knee before every truth. The mediocre man is much more wicked than either he himself or anyone else imagines, because his coldness masks his wickedness. He never gets in a rage. He perpetrates innumerable little infamies, so petty that they do not appear to be infamous. And he is never afraid, for he relies, you see, on the vast multitudes of those who are like him. When, however, a man mediocre by nature becomes a true and sincere Christian, he, let me say this clearly, he ceases absolutely to be mediocre. I am not saying he will become a genius. I am not saying he will become a man of striking superiority. No. I'm saying that by his humility, he will be rescued from mediocrity by the hand that rules the world, God. Because the man who loves is truly never mediocre. Because the man who loves is truly never mediocre. I think this is wonderful. He's a wonderful author, and I'm in the next video. I was going to say I will read you other things, but no, I have to move on because the next video will probably be on Leon Bloy. I think we need to hear about him a little bit. So I will leave this. I will put this for members only, okay, for about 3 days. Today is the 15th, so I will Wednesday, so I will probably change it to the general public on Saturday or Sunday, okay. But first of all, I want to give you members the chance to see it without the ads and everything, and then when I move it to the public, I will put the ads in. Well, I don't, but YouTube does. I will I will let it do it. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.